find out. I think I'm live. Good evening, world. Welcome to my lockdown sessions. This week is going to be slightly different, maybe a bit shorter than usual, but also you might be able to tell I got a bit more room around me. I'm going to be a bit more like the weather guy, putting out videos and stuff behind me. So I have, in case you don't know already, been on an lockdown tour. I've been up and down the UK all week, been in Hull, Salford, Liverpool, Cardiff, Newport, and yesterday London Docklands. And it was a very emotional experience. There was a lot going on. But before I get into all of that and drill that into the details, I'm gonna start off with a video that I played last week. I hope you dig it. This is my new feel, new look attempt to get a bit more room. So bear with me if there's a few technical issues. But so far, I think the fact that I'm closer to the modem means that I'm getting less interference. Please keep comments and stuff coming. I see a couple people are in now watching. It's on. It's going to be a dope show today, I guarantee you that much. And I'm going to start off, as I said, with a video that you may or may not have seen before. Let's do this.
It's red terror, black peril, fever time. The masses need dividing, race myths and reams of lies still sit beside the feet of a defeated Kaiser. So you must be the virus. Keep inside the screams and violence, hate adrenalized, keep them unequal, feed them misleading lies, feed them people to demonize. It's all a sequel, secret ties they keep disguised so we can't see the sky. Street sirens never seem to see them silent, off the leash and leaderless, iron string stealing wire. Look, see, they're stealing wives. As the seasons wind, keep them blinded, flightless, feet binded, all at sea, they don't deserve a seat. Keep them sleeping in sties. Keep them uniting, keep them striking, you don't meet the legal requirements. People penalized never seem to see the prizes or read the signs. Heard in the news sheets and wireless. Chief advisors, elite assignments never seen to creep and sneak behind them. Just dreaming of the beast Poseidon, ports and crisis, sailors reside beside the sea, never seem to see the wider horizon of the sea beside them. So row, row, row your boat to sow the seeds of violence, heaving, climbing, black, lethal creatures, increasing crime. You people need to stick to cleaning, sweep the dying, repatriate, tell them leave, we need peace and quiet. Heathens, diseases seize their minds, so it's red terror, black peril, fever time. It's red terror, black peril, fever time.
Yeah. In case you didn't know, this isn't my face going grainy, this is the quality of green screen video. But bear with me, I'm gonna try and sharpen that up. Yeah, that poem was written specifically with the ideas that inspired the black peril very much in mind. Red terror, black peril. And traveling up and down the country, I've definitely seen this elision between anti-blackness and anti-communism. It's not as if every black person is hated or every sort of Labour Party member or every left-winger is hated. But any time that the aims and intentions allied between those two groups, there's a lot of legwork, a lot of heavy lifting that goes into making sure that there's no unity, that there's a lot of division and people arguing and so forth. I'm not even going to get into some of the hashtags that have been going around this week, but it does feel sometimes that they're just sort of provoking people to say stupid things or trying to suck people into meaningless debates. Bearing in mind, this is all about a post-Edward Colston statue crashing, a post-George Floyd's murder moment. And we should be mindful that that's the energy we need to keep up. That's the focus that we need to keep up. I'm going to play one more video. Again, try and tamper with my green screen and so forth for a little while longer. And then, as I said, get into the facts and figures about this thing. All right, yo. This is the video I did straight after hearing the news of George Floyd's brutal murder. And yeah. Check it out
Sick
if you haven't already.
An evil system refueled. Sick of smiling while I am kicked in the tooth. Sick of delivering cool. Sick of digging up jewels just to give them.
Can everyone hear me? Hope so.
These people seem to delight in evil and spite, deceit, misleading and dividing. What does it take to see it's not a mistake? Dropped in a lake, shot in the face. How much more of this will we take? How long you think we'll sit still catching kicks to the face? Burned as a witch fixed to the stake. How much injury is the limit for a human spirit to break? Camera phones capture Navarone, bodies dragged and broken, wanna grab the Calagas. From Tallahassee, Paris Road to every fascist home to ash and smoke. Yo. The system means we sink in the machine, plead for permission to breathe under a police commissioner's knee. All authorized to be traumatized, this slaughter is normalized. All silent, saw it and fall in line. Done with talking polite, charge assault with incitement, marauding and rioting. Set it all alight, pour all the petrol ignite. Expect you to step aside for the genocidal, extrajudicial executions and no weapon by you. Men with splendid titles took your ancestors' heads with rifles, then the psychos tell you it's a perpetual cycle. This isn't a figure of speech. 100 years of lynchings, bodies strung upstream, drowned in rivers and beaches. How many victims unseen, never a viral image screens. To stop killing us, please, it's considered militancy. Expect me to get punched in the ribs and then walk away? Or to plead for a life that's not yours to take? Smoking every outspoken liar, ropes tied as they relied on us to keep the system that chokes us alive. Open fire won't retire, it's all the sickness. I don't want to give talks to kids, I give them pitchforks for the pigs. I hope the good old days never come back around. I plan to stand by Babylonian flagpoles and drag them down. Head in the dragon's mouth, plunge the dagger, drag the statues down. Clap as it collapses under cannon clouds. They owe civilization and life to us, right? And agriculture and science from us. So strung and tied us up, then disguised it and lied to us. Taking flight from the sun, every lie you constructed will soon just be a pile of dust. Maybe I shouldn't be so outspoken and shoot from the hip. Wait, it's what you did, use the tool on unarmed school kids. False accusers calling for recruits and order troops in. Yo, I don't need truth and reconciliation for brute asphyxiation. We nailed to the crucifix and we need liberation. I'm sick of keeping an evil system refueled. I'm sick of smiling when I am being kicked in the tooth. Stop thinking you can march forwards and think backwards. Stop pretending your condition is any different because you're living under a different flag. Stop believing you're better because your ancestors abducted by different kidnappers. Stop confusing lies for truth. Stop expecting empathy and equality from a system that dehumanizes you. Built on your immiseration, it's blind to you. Withdraw your labor support and believe in the system until it's collapsed. If we all refuse to work, the system's finished, it's crashed. We won't leave a fragment or piece to recover. That was my cousin, a little brother, father, sister, or mother. I won't be happy till this entire system is smothered. No peace until this whole system is smothered. That me I say, the system has to bottom down. You understand? If you don't understand, get it. That Google Translate Jamaican. You know what I mean? But yeah, we're at serious times. We're at serious crossroads. And if
I'm talking with no mic. I was just saying, we're at a serious crossroads at the moment, and if you think that this is the most serious point of the corona epidemic and coronavirus malaise, then I think we're about to be surprised. The eviction freeze hasn't ended yet, the mortgage holiday hasn't ended yet, the furlough scheme is still just about going. And when we finally see the true face of this establishment, as being, we're not going to give you proper jobs and reorder the economy, we're going to give you a £10 voucher to go and eat out on a Monday and get the virus. It should again just make absolutely clear how little regard they have for the sanctity of human life, how little regard they have for the people who even voted for them, because they have the power and that's all they needed. Yeah, I'm going to get into some music. It does feel smoother tonight, right? Let me know in your comments if you're enjoying the stream. I haven't had any interruptions. I'm basically sitting right next to the modem. So tonight's show goes smooth as I hope it does. Then I think we're going to keep doing this way. Feel less stressed. Things are not cutting out. And let me know if there's any sound Green Screen Experimentations, Volume 1. Let's go. Up in here. I hope you're feeling me out there, people. Yeah. Nice to see some familiar faces in the crowd. The virtual crowd, that is. I'm going to resume my seat here for a second. Whew. How is everyone out there? I hope you are feeling not too gaslighted by the current realities that we're in. Check it out one time. In case you didn't realize, I'm broadcasting to you live from my living room, green screen studio. I've had an incredibly intense week, so I'm sorry if any of my friends out there have just ignored your phone calls and messages and whatnot. But I've driven, it must have been about 1,000 kilometers up and down the country, and really got a barometer for what the UK feels like, or certainly England and Wales feel like post-lockdown. I'm going to start off, I guess, talking about one of the most resonant issues of the weekend that everyone was debating and was on the tips of everyone's tongues. Cancel culture. Yeah. I maybe should start with playing a video from one of my favorite people. Anyone that knows me knows that this guy is definitely one of my favorite people in the universe. And I'm being sarcastic. I just need to find this. And we'll kick things off by having a little analysis of, if that's a worthy word, this hot mess. Make some noise for the inimitable, the irreplicable, the incorrigible, the intolerable Toby Young.
The cancel culture this week, especially with all these signatories. Is it something that's growing, the cancel culture? I mean, people do have a right to speak out, don't they?
Yes, I think it is growing. When I set up the Free Speech Union back in February, in part to protect people who are targeted for cancellation, primarily by outrage mobs on social media, we got about 6 cries for help a week. Now we're getting about 6 a day. And for every person that contacts us...
There's been a lot made of...
There's
been a lot made of the cancel culture this week, especially with all these signatories. Is it something that's growing, the cancel culture? I mean, people do have a right to speak out, don't they?
Yes, I think it is growing. When I set up the Free Speech Union back in February, in part to protect people who are targeted for cancellation, primarily by outrage mobs on social media, we got about 6 cries for help a week. Now we're getting about 6 a day. And for every person that contacts us...
6 cries for help. It's really interesting how they confect in the language of victimhood that they accuse all the liberal snowflakes of having to be super right-wing and shut everyone down. And they complain about being cancelled on national broadcast platforms, on like The Telegraph, The Independent, on television, news, print media. I'm being silenced. Listen to me, being silenced. Anyway, continue, Tony.
Help. There are at least 100 who don't know of our existence and don't know that there's an organisation out there that can protect them if they're targeted in this way. I really welcome this letter because in the past, people like Owen Jones have said that cancel culture is a figment of the imagination of white, privileged conservatives.
Well, yeah, it is.
Like me. Well, here's a letter signed by some of the most...
by privileged white people.
distinguished left-wing writers and intellectuals in the world. You know,
J.K. Rowling is not a distinguished left-wing writer or journalist. She's a very wealthy woman who's slightly detached from, I guess, the ordinary realities of what socialism means. So she's got a really anti-communist bent and a really anti-trans bent. And anytime anybody challenges her, then she kicks off.
J.K. Rowling, Salman Rushdie, Noam Chomsky, Margaret Atwood, all raising the alarm about cancel culture, and they're on his side.
Yeah, Normally, again, I'd have some time to edit this and curate my responses in a more, perhaps, measured way. But my visceral reaction is just, this is utter bollocks, isn't it? I mean, what else do you call this? Bolax. And it's actually begun, from my observations, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Monroe Bergdorf had made a comment about L'Oreal jumping on the George Floyd bandwagon. L'Oreal, again, demonstrating their tone deafness, just decided to tweet something really performative allyship again, you know, something really vapid. Well, you know, Black Lives Matter to us. And Monroe quite rightly was down their throats because if you don't know, she was sacked by L'Oreal for speaking out about racism long before this whole moment happened, this Black Lives Matter movement happened. And yeah, what's fascinating is then what happened next. Suddenly it becomes about trans people hijacking the Black Lives Matter movement, and actually I have a womb, and then J.K. Rowling just sort of piped up and got all involved. And I think the TERF energy, and for those who don't know, TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminism energy, is one which frankly aligns with Karenism, is a new word I've coined. The whole point of it is to stop people talking, not to educate them, not to open minds up more, but it's to close down conversation and to protect people's privilege. That's what J.K. Rowling is complaining about, that's what Toby Young is complaining about. And throughout this project that I'm about to embark on, Black Peril 2020, I want to open conversations, I want to start them. Everywhere I've been is drenched in historic racism, and that's not even debatable to me. I've had lots and lots of discussions with people along the way, and if anything, racism is just as bad today as it has been in a very, very long time. Maybe not quite as bad as 1919, but those attitudes haven't gone anywhere. They're all pervasive. They're in the bricks, they're in the mortar, they're in the very architecture that we walk through every day. And I want to start a conversation about that. I don't want to shut people down. But interestingly, I've been on the receiving end of a Twitter outrage mob, noddering. I won't even dignify the screen by putting up a picture, but a few of these people, thankfully I can't remember their name, I think I blocked them out. Lord Matzo, a few others, who just decided to try and cancel me after I started talking about the Black Peril on Radio 4. So I went on Saturday Morning Live to talk with the incredible Asma Mir and Richard Coles, two lovely people, and we had a great conversation. And immediately afterwards, an outrage mob, basically mobilized by right-wing people who, many of whom are not Jewish, but claim to speak on behalf of every Jewish person, decided to gang up on me and try and shut me down. Once you have that slur of anti-Semite, then everyone's supposed to at least have an air of suspicion. This got written up in The Guardian. I'm associated with anti-Semitism, even though anyone who knows me knows I really haven't said anything anti-Semitic before, and I don't hold anti-Semitic opinions. But it really lets you know that the actual cancel culture, the actual cancelling being done is against people like Jackie Walker, against people like Mark Wadsworth. They've been shut down and silenced. And in fact, Toby Young is on every other week telling everyone how he can't speak. He's constantly on the airwaves, broadcast media, telling people how hard it is for him. Why have I got his picture up so long? I'm sorry for traumatizing anybody who's been watching thus far. Trigger warnings if you don't like poor Phil Mitchell lookalikes. I'm sorry for flashing it up on the screen for so long. But let's move on, because it ain't personal. I got some comments here from Audrey, 6 cries a day. Can someone lend me a tiny violin? Yeah, booty hootie. Somebody said they don't like your tweet. Anyway, considering that the left are supposed to be the snowflakes, they really do seem very emotionally brittle. And the subject I'd like to explore around that is, well, I don't think that it's cancel culture that's doing it. That searing pain that you feel, it's not being cancelled, it's called being ashamed. It's because racism isn't a good look, and you should be ashamed when one of your number is caught being an idiot. It's still an important human proclivity, shame. It's the thing that stops you twerking at a wedding reception. It's the thing that stops you pouring rum on your granny's head for no reason, because it would be embarrassing. There's a natural reflex that we have that stops us from doing embarrassing stuff or perpetuating it. The reason that white people behaved the way that they did in 1919 is because no one was watching, except other white people who approved. And now everyone can see that this sort of exclusionary, selfish, jealous, envious, insecure energy, which erects statues to men who were just basically thieves and murderers and ignores the women, the black people, the working class suffering that made things possible. Well, that's embarrassing. And anyone who realizes the truth should be ashamed of the past, and should want to do something about it, to erect different heroes and different monuments. Yeah, I feel like I've been talking for quite a while. So I'm going to launch into this whole Black Peril 2020 thing with a little bit of performance that happened. Gosh, I can't even remember. All the days are blurring. I think it was last Thursday. I was in Liverpool and had a great opportunity to do a little bit of live recording. So providing that this works, oh yeah, here it comes. This is some live video from me in the Liverpool docks. It's really raw. At some point I'm going to edit this and make it super slick and put effects and stuff, but I haven't had a chance to do that because I literally just got back to Brum. So here we go. I hope you enjoy it. This isn't Liverpool, this is Salford. Yeah. You can't get no more than that. I'm just going to give you a smidgen. It's going to be loads and loads and loads of music. But that was an excerpt from me performing and checking out a space in Salford. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with the Black Peril 2020 as a concept or an album, then you can of course check out the album, The Black Peril, on Spotify. It will help me. Every stream helps, right? But the project itself is based on race riots that happened, real race riots that happened here in the UK 101 years ago, in 1919, from Glasgow to South Shields and the places that we're going, Hull, Cardiff, Newport, Salford, Liverpool and London. There were race riots, ferocious race riots, 1 year after the armistice, when you'd think world peace, people coming together, the end of the First World War. In fact, what happened were similar racial conflagrations in Taranto, in Italy, in Kingston, Jamaica, in Chicago, in New York, in New Orleans. And as a way of commemorating that, but also of appraising its significance, especially in this time in 2020, I'm putting together an online festival. Yeah, that's gonna be dope. So if you don't already know about it, make sure that you check out this space. Also my Instagrams and all the socials. I'm gonna be pushing out the message a lot stronger this week. and hopefully going on sale live with tickets in the next couple of days. It's going to be streamed from September the 14th to September the 18th. That's Monday to Friday. And we've got some incredible guests lined up. I'm going to be talking with my brethren, homie, inspiration, guiding light, dope MC, Loki is going to be a guest. The incredible academic with swaggademic, my brother Kehinde Andrews. I've not even like pre-prepped these introductions, but if you don't know Kehinde Andrews, I don't know where you've been for the past few years. Author of Back to Black, senior lecturer and creator of a Black Studies course at Birmingham Central University. So that's going to be an incredible talk. Not to mention some of my musical compadres, Nicholas Payton, the pioneer of BAM, Black American music. BAM! We don't deal with Uncle Tom versions of jazz over here, strictly BAM. So Nicholas and I are going to be chopping up what that concept means and what the significance were of race rights on both sides of the Atlantic 100 years ago. Jason Moran, another person as a hero of mine, incredible piano player, and somebody who created the album, project, the Harlem Hellfighters, to commemorate James Reese Europe, a black jazz musician who was from Alabama, lived in Harlem, was a Garveyite, and fought in the First World War. So this history is very much enmeshed. In 1919, James Reese Europe himself was killed by the drummer in his band, somebody who'd suffered from shell shock, war trauma, and the tragedy is that a year after this triumphant moment, not only were there race riots all over the world, but one of the greatest black innovators and composers in Negro music was killed by his own band member. So this gives us an opportunity to discuss, Jason and I, the significance of this music 100 years later, but also how trauma turns in within the black community, how we end up attacking each other often and not getting to the lofty heights that I suspect we intended to be at. Yeah, I'm going to play a little bit more music. This time it will actually be from Liverpool, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the sites that I've been visiting shortly. Yeah, so that was Greengate, Salford. This is the Docklands of Liverpool. You so vain. You probably think this song is That's enough. I need to whet appetite so that you, of course, come back and listen to more. I'll be playing a few more excerpts, obviously, on this live stream on the coming weeks, but I want to focus and direct you all towards Black Peril 2020, hashtag Black Peril 2020. Tickets should be on sale, as I said, later on this week, and I don't think there will be an opportunity for you not to hear about what's going down. Loki, Kehinde Andrews, Nicholas Payton, Jason Moran, many others. It's going to be an interesting, fascinating time. Some great academics are going to be joining me, Catherine Tackley. So yeah, I'm really, really excited. But just to kind of finish up some of these earlier points I was making, I'm really mindful of the fact of how hard it is to get exposure for good ideas, for good projects. Obviously, I spent a long time editing and having a fantastic conversation with Ava Vidal. If you haven't checked that interview out, where have you been? Do go back and check out last week's broadcast. But to get the sort of traction and currency that an interview or conversation like that would need, it should be plugged. Obviously, her and I would share things on our social media. But if you want a national audience, you have to get radio pluggers, just as I did for the Black Peril as an album release. If I want the information to saturate and get out to the widest number of people possible, I have to pay money. That's just that's the state of affairs as it is for an independent artist. What's interesting is that there must obviously be a lot of money behind your Melanie Phillipses, your Toby Youngs, these people who constantly complain about not having a platform. J.K. Rowling has sold a lot of books. She's legitimately famous for what she's done, but it's money and access and power which allows her the sort of platform that most of us could only dream of having. I think that's about all I want to say about cancel culture. But it's not cancel culture, it's embarrassment. They don't like being criticized, they don't like being embarrassed, so they want to silence the people that are doing the embarrassing. Just keep embarrassing them, because they are basically pretty disgraceful human products. Yeah, I said it. I think this trip, to move on to a random segue, has really made me clarify the difference between Karens, the historical version of Karens, the antecedent of Karens. Yes, it's that word that's in popular parlance today. And legitimate white female allies who were often vilified and brutalized for their association with people of color. I'm going to start by playing an excerpt from a blog, a great show that was on, a podcast rather, that was on BBC Sounds. I first got drawn to it because of some sort of Twitter storm, and I thought I was going to see lots of Karen controversy. But I didn't see any of that. It was actually just a really interesting conversation. And hopefully, again, I haven't had time to edit this, but hopefully it should make sense.
Anxiety about, like, in the colonies, when people take their wives out, when kind of, very privileged.
And does this trait of Karen, does this vulnerability, does it have any historical roots?
Like, yeah, totally. So there's a whole thing in, like, British imperialism. They are really, really frightened about something that they, unfortunately, at the time called Black Peril. And this was a real anxiety.
I think it's unfortunate. It's given me an album title. It's embarrassing. It's not unfortunate. It's white people snitching on themselves, really. And if you're looking back at your great-grandparents or grandparents, like, that's what you called an entire race of people. You associate them with disease and peril. Like, black is perilous. I think it says more about the white psyche than the black reality.
About black men in the empire, like a real fear that they were, like, sexually more attractive to white women than white men, but also kind of sexually predatory. And so there's a lot of anxiety about, like, in the colonies, when people take their wives out, when kind of, colonial officials and stuff, when they have wives and daughters in the empire, there's this, like, constant fear about
Again, I cite the scholarly and erudite Ava Vidal, who said, I think she was quoting Paul Mooney, white people aren't scared of black people, they're scared of karma.
Women's safety and about how vulnerable they are, but also this kind of worry that actually it might not just be that they might be, like, vulnerable, it's also they might actually, like, want these black men, that they might actually, like, be lusting after all of these men.
Good God, no! Heaven forbid. So what you're suggesting is that women of their own volition might freely choose their sexual partners. I mean, irrespective of race, this is actually quite a dangerous social phenomenon. We spend a lot of time over many centuries slut-shaming women who have the audacity to choose which partners they want to be with or have any sort of sexual independence. And it's worth mentioning here that on 2 separate occasions I had conversations both in London, in Hull, about, anyway, what actually happened was white women who chose to cross the colour line and associate with black men or black people in general were stripped naked and beaten and paraded in the streets 100 years ago as examples of what not to do. Many of these women already had black and brown children, and they were ostracized from their own families, from their communities. It begs the question, what happened to them? You know, these ideas and attitudes didn't just dissipate overnight. The mobs of thousands that attacked innocent black people on the streets, they all had children. They all presumably went on to have friends and associates and to multiply and provide us with the recipe for a modern Britain that we have today. And that's just a really interesting thing, because right in the midst of Karenism, if you like, and let's define what that is, the fragility of white womanhood being weaponized as a danger to black men. The flip side to that is the actual brutalization, horrible treatment of white women who chose to side with people or choose things out of their own volition. So you've got this confected white victimhood and this actual white victimhood, and I find it very interesting that one thing is sort of remembered while the other is conveniently obscured and forgotten.
The colony, and then after the war, when there's a lot more migration to Britain, this kind of comes over into Britain, and a lot of racism in Britain in the 50s and 60s, and a lot of things like the Notting Hill race riots in 1958 were caused initially by white racists getting really angry at mixed race couples, but particularly getting really angry at white women with men of colour. So that like this real fear, like these men are coming over to Britain and like taking our women.
And it's my personal perspective. Again, I'm going to do more research and speak to a lot more specialists in the area. But that fear of genetic annihilation is a convenient shorthand for a terror which eclipses the entire West. It's something that we're witnessing. Again, the threat of a black man is the threat of genetic annihilation. And what does that mean? I listened to a fascinating talk, hopefully I can find the picture, with the great Nick Cannon, who I've grown in estimation of over the past year or so, and Joy DeGruy. If you know me, I'm already a fan of Joy DeGruy. So the two of them had a conversation which you can check at Cannon's class on YouTube. I was trying to find the picture but can't see it. She makes the point, among many brilliant points, that the reason that white genocide, as it's called, is a fear is because it would only be a fear if you consider yourself exceptional to the rest of humanity. You can't be removed by something that you're already a part of. If we're part of the human family, then how can you be eradicated? Unless you've convinced yourself over millennia, certainly over the past few centuries, that whiteness is exceptional, that Europeanness is exceptional. And she asks a staggering question that I never thought of before until today. Why is Europe a continent? Geographically, it's basically a peninsula stuck onto the end of Asia. Why is it exceptional? And that protection of white exceptionalism is the thing that makes them afraid to be wiped out, afraid that there's a level playing field, because, and this isn't very flattering to white people, afraid that if there's a level playing field that they won't succeed. Well, I want my white brothers and sisters to recognize that you are equal. You shouldn't accept this actually quite insulting definition of your capabilities that comes from the white racist superstructures above. If there was a level playing field, there'd be more than enough to go around, and it's my personal conviction that things would be a lot better. But yeah. I'm gonna segue straight into a news item that I didn't get the chance to break down very much over previous weeks, again, because I didn't have such uninterrupted broadband. I'm enjoying this tonight. Keep your comments coming though, any questions that you've got, so I can respond to them in real time. This feels like I'm really live streaming without any hiccups. Famous last words. This was a piece that I did with the BBC just a couple of weeks ago, looking around Birmingham and of course responding to this recent terror that Middle England has about statues disappearing. What is it about the statues? Well, yeah, let's just watch this piece and I'll interject as and where I can.
Today I went on a history tour. My guide, Soweto Kinch, musician and writer, The statues of Matthew Bolton and James Watt and William Murdoch have been put into storage, part of Birmingham's proud links to the Industrial Revolution. But they also had business.
Even the terminology of an industrial revolution implying that sort of the foundries and coke and coal just sort of formed a revolution by themselves negates the startup capital. But I don't want to preempt stuff I'm about to say.
Dealings with slave plantations. Should that take the shine off their reputations?
That's right, and this is a place here that we traditionally commemorate the golden boys of the Industrial Revolution, James Watt, Matthew Bolton. We never really ask how they got their startup capital. And in the case of James Watt particularly, a lot of their, business capital was generated from slavery.
It is complicated though. James Watt himself was an abolitionist.
It's very complicated because people who professed on paper to being abolitionists still made money from slavery, from trading on a...
If you bear in mind the most obvious fact about emancipation that we're starting to reckon with now, in 1833, the slave owners were paid £20 million compensation, and then a further 20 million on top, which was acquired through the apprenticeship period. So that's why slavery didn't formally end until 1838, because for at least 5 years afterwards, enslaved Africans still had to work on the land, till it, give all of their product to the landowners, to British planters, because it was recompense for the slave masters. So 20 million plus 20 million. They were still paying that off for many years afterwards. And you have to also consider the interest that we as a country, us British taxpayers, were paying, as everybody knows, until 2015, interest on that compensation settlement. So it's quite easy to call yourself an abolitionist if you've benefited from abolition, if you've been one of the recipients of the huge compensation handout, and then you simply transition that startup capital to running a factory. The very first model engine that I saw was a picture in Soho House of a Jamaican enslaved African loading up a machine with sugarcane, loading up a new steam engine. So much like the cotton gin, it was intended to slightly ameliorate the conditions for Africans on plantations, but not to make it better, to make it more efficient, to make it faster, to produce more sugar. So there you go.
The produce of slavery.
Soweto, where are you going to take me next?
We should go to the Brass House. That's a perfect place to continue.
Birmingham may not have been a Liverpool or Bristol with direct involvement in the Atlantic slave trade, but at one time it was the world's biggest manufacturer of brass.
And the reason was, it was manufacturing things called manillas. Manillas would be small sort of like copper or brass arrangements that were like bangles or bracelets that could be worn, but chiefly they were exchanged for human beings.
So
like a big coin, an ingot that was manufactured here in Birmingham in vast numbers. You look around you if you live in the West Midlands, there's bound to be a street, Brass Lane, brass this, brass that, because Birmingham's wealth literally rocketed off of the back of manufacturing brass. And these ingots, or manillas, M-A-N-I-L-L-A, were used to buy human beings, to enslave Africans. And so long after Britain had formally abolished the slave trade, its own shipping fleets of slavery in 1807, long afterwards, 60, 70 years afterwards, Birmingham was still making a lot of money out of slavery through the chains, the manacles, and these manillas. It's something that we never talk about.
So this is somebody I've actually heard of. Samuel Galton.
Galton Tower, named after the Quaker gun manufacturer Samuel Galton. His guns were often traded for slaves.
250, 300 years ago, lots of people...
It's subtle, but when they say guns traded for slaves, I mean, Peter's a wonderful guy, the interviewer that put this piece together, but it's again part of that subtle brainwashing that we've all endured. They're not slaves, they're human beings. He traded them for human beings, for enslaved Africans.
I'm going to say, why do we need to bother about this now?
We were paying interest to slave masters until 2015. So the serious conversation is to set up some sort of sovereign wealth fund that is something like reparations. How do we still have gun and knife crime violence here in the UK, and particularly in Birmingham, being blamed on the descendants of slaves, when the guy who invented the guns and exported them around the world is venerated as a hero?
We reached the jewellery quarter, the memorial clock, harking back to the importance of empire. But what would Soweto's call for reparations mean?
It might involve some cash payments. It could also involve bursaries, grants, sovereign wealth funds that accrue and increase in value over time that the descendants of enslaved Africans have access to.
History is all around us in street names and statues. 100 days on from lockdown, we all seem to be viewing the world with new eyes. Peter Wilson, BBC Midlands Today, Birmingham.
Thank you, Peter. I mean, we all seem to be viewing the world with new eyes, or maybe just taking the blinkers off, taking off this white enforced blindfold that we've been wearing for way too long. And it immiserates and impoverishes white people, not as much as it does black people, because in their mind is this caveat that, well, at least I'm not black, at least I'm not at the bottom. But it impoverishes us all. Let's be absolutely clear about that. As I was in Newport this week, talking with a wonderful woman who owns a pub there, my homie DJ Winchester was chopping it up, and she asked a question that I've heard many of white people asking over the past couple of weeks. Why now? It's a very legitimate and fair question, because if you're standing on the outside and aren't aware of how all these issues are interleaved, then you're wondering, what has coronavirus got to do with the murder of George Floyd, got to do with pulling down statues? Why now? We've got bigger fish to fry. Why would you be all concerned about the past and history? Just leave it be. She was describing that her boyfriend had gone to Colston School in Bristol and thought it was a wonderful school and couldn't understand why for the life of him people were so angry because it was such a great school. Of course, he had no idea about the scale of destruction, genocide, murder and pillage that Edward Colston himself had enacted. So you can make the obvious response to that question of why now, because you didn't know the truth. And now is a time to start revealing truths. Why now also makes me think, yeah, what is this link between coronavirus, the fact, pardon me, that Britain is the most infections per capita in the world. We've dealt with this crisis worse, as bad, if not worse, than America and Brazil. There is a correlation between the society that really refined and industrialized slavery, that is Britain, the society that commodified human beings with such refinement, and the situation of free market fundamentalism that we have today. There is a thread that you can draw that says some very, very clever chaps went over the seas and did some very clever stuff that we can't discuss in much detail because it's all very clever and it would confuse you and your tiny plebeian mind. Yep, and of course they had a very RP accent like that. It was all bamboozlement. And these very clever captains of industry did clever stuff. And that's created a reality of the revolving door today, of elites and billionaires who we never really question how they got their money in the first place, or really how clever they really are. We just fall into line deferentially and think, well, they should have that level of access to power and privilege. They should be able to do a Richard Desmond or whoever these cronies are buying off politicians willy-nilly. Because if you accept that slavers were given compensation and statues, then you accept a reality in which you just nod along like a lemming when a posh guy in a suit tells you everything is fine with coronavirus. You just nod like a lemming, not that lemmings nod, you nod like a seal. Do seals nod? I don't know. You nod a lot when people who seemingly know how to bewitch you with an accent or superior education come up with nothing solutions for serious problems. And we should all be able to stand back and say, what good has the racism done me? Yeah, white people. What good has the misogyny done you as a man? What good has this version of capitalism done us as an entire society? We should start debunking all these ridiculous anti-communist excuses for why we are where we are and start looking at disentangling all of this greed and selfishness from the system, which lands us exactly where we are. You can tell, I normally script this stuff, but I'm just waxing lyrical a bit more today. I'm going to play one more song and get back to some descriptions of the Black Peril 2020. I know you want to hear it. You better want to hear it. Yeah, you.
Basic MC.
Yeah. I don't have any theme except I feel like I want to wrap up this beat for like 30 seconds. If you guys have any questions, post them now because it takes 30 seconds to reach my little inbox thing there. And make sure you're on the ecamm invite group thing as it says, so that you can all comment accordingly. I've got a quick comment here, one from Audrey. She's giving us some great stimuli. Right in the economy. They could have just solved that problem by not taking away people's land and things they didn't deserve in the first place. But yeah, you realise that so much of what we see and fear with this mindset is projection. It's their fear of the same thing they've done to other people being done to them. That's really important to keep in mind. Yeah, check it out 2 times. You know my voice a little dry. Don't know what to say, I guess it's time to improvise. Yeah, I don't need no instruction, but it's nice doing streams without no interruption. Yeah, you know I got to handle this. I don't rap for scripts, I just need some bandwidth. I keep doing it. Yo, I don't retire. I don't know who that is, but back to you is double fire. Yes, I will not retire. I do my thing on the track, worship the Messiah. The one that's coming back. I don't know in what shape or form, but my brain's torn, word is gone. You know I've been up and down the whole UK. Now my brain feels like a cooked souffle. It's all great, I might recover. It's Tuesday, tomorrow though. On the microphone and drop another show. Oh, yo, I hope that you are ready. Cause you know in a couple weeks time you're getting heavy. You're driving around the country, no Chevy. It be hashtag Black Peril 2020. Hashtag Black Peril 2020. You know I got the dope flow. You know how I do flow. You should know on the mic I'm just like Caruso. Knock you out like Daniel LaRusso and move cold. Oh, yo, I just came to do this on the microphone. Shave my head like a Buddhist. You don't know, I don't tutor. I just make the music. And yeah, I freestyle when my brain feels lucid. Oh, but yo, I'm not really in a rage. I ain't really seen no comments on the comments page. Yo, I just be rapping sense. Maybe they all feel commentary is just inadequate. It's all redundant. I'm moving through On the mic, my brain complex like a Rubik's Cube. Oh, yeah, I'm hovering with an extra vibe. I guess the world needs a little white genocide. You know what I meant. I didn't mean that. You know, just clear out all the beeswax. What the world really needs is to relax and speak facts. Woo! And you can see my mind's dope while my mind's like, oh, I don't know what to say. I'm removing the blindfold until our eyes open. We all see the truth. I'm here freestyling in the little green screen booth. Oh, now I finished. And you can see I'm adult running out of lyrics. So, let's move it on. Yes, people. I like this beat too, but I'm not going to play it all. I'll probably keep it as a bit of a backdrop. Please let me know if the sound and all that is popping. Get me the 2 flames, let me know. Everything is blessed. There are a few more things that I would like to finish up exploring in the show today. One thing that struck me, and you know, yes, I am hypersensitive to stuff on this trip. You might say, if you didn't go looking for racism, you wouldn't find it. Well, you know what? The end of racism means you go looking for racism and you don't find any. That's not a quote from me. Big up Sunshine in California. That's a great perspective to have. I should be able to go looking for racism and not see it anywhere. Sadly, along this trip, it was emanating from every leaking orifice of the country. Pardon my graphic choice of language. Now I'm just trying to find a particular picture that I took earlier. I can't see it from here, but I'm hoping this is the one. I'll just drag it in and hope for the best. Come on, picture. You know, this is what happens when you say everything's going well with your stream and it doesn't necessarily. There we go. So I'm going to sit back a little bit and talk so you can see Wagwan. I might just make this green screen thing stop. There we go. So I was staying in this hotel. Let me see if you can see me and the screen. Beautiful. Not so beautiful. Okay. Bear with me, people. I'll make this picture a bit smaller. This is all so organic, so raw, so real, people. So visceral. Yeah, so I was staying in this hotel called The Elite, right near Hull train station, more or less, Elite something or other. And there was nothing exceptionally bad about this hotel. It was actually a very comfortable stay, nice people, well-intentioned. But yeah, notice that Elgin marble fake statue in the corner and lots of sort of white statues about the place. And recognize, at the time that the Elgin marbles were discovered, this wasn't an apolitical, purely historical thing. The idea of Britain stealing them and sticking them in the British Museum and claiming Greek civilization for its own was also an act of whitening. You might not know this, but the statues themselves, they found out recently, were heavily painted at the time. They would have had pigmentation. Greeks at the period probably considerably darker than they are today. But the main point is that these statues were bleached by time and sometimes deliberately to give the impression of whiteness being the standard. And here we are in modern day Hull, right across the country, and inheriting this psychosis and reproducing it, reproducing these images of beauty. Somebody, I can't remember who, it might have been Joy DeGruy or somebody else, asking if blondness, for example, only accounts, the genes that produce it only account for like 5% of a white population. Most people, it's peroxide, use different products to get that effect. Why are 95% of people striving to attain a concept of beauty that less than 5% of the world's population can ever actually get? And that sort of inequality underpins our deference, I think, to symbols of power, images of power that we'll never actually be privy to really having ourselves. I'm going to do a whistle-stop look at these places that I went to and ending in London. But starting with Salford, you might not be able to see all these details and as much relief as I would like, but I'll just kind of wave over the screen so you can see them here. And point the camera a little bit closer towards myself. Bam. So raw, so visceral, so real. And this was the bridge that I started playing You saw a little excerpt of in Salford. I'm not going to go into all the details of all the moving things. You're going to have to tune into the festival, Black Peril 2020, from September the 14th to get the full picture. But Duke Street, which is here, spray painted over with white so you can't actually see the street name anymore, was the site of a gathering, a black dance hall where some approximately 50 to 60 black residents in this whole district of Salford lived 100 years ago. There were so many black people, 50 or 60, which seems ridiculous today, but at the time considered so many that the local constabulary called it Dixieland. That was the nickname for the area. Such were the prevalence of black people. And the scary thing was that black women, white women, all women were fraternizing with black men, black sailors, and breeding and having children. One major reason it's been suggested why there was such animosity towards white women who decided to have mixed race children is because it was easy to expatriate, easy to repatriate forcibly West Indians and West Africans and Indians and Lascars and Chinese, as they often did. After these riots happened, they forcibly removed up to as many as 3,000 black people from the UK. Harder to do for their white wives and their mixed race children. And I think that's one reason why the authorities were so keen to discourage it. These people are foreigners, let's keep the demarcation between the colonials and the British different. Let's keep that demarcation rigid. Even though people in Hull, black British sailors considered themselves very British, even if they were born in Jamaica or West Africa, and they gave themselves the title Britishers. Moving on, you can see this other part of Salford, the street around the corner, and the Docklands area itself. What struck me, just quickly, is how gentrified the area around it is being, how quickly that gentrification process is happening, how extreme, and how few remnants of that time are left. It says something about states of transience and transigence that black people have always had historically in the UK. And do we ever leave anything beyond the faintest impression of our music or culture behind for people to analyse? That's a lot of food for thought there that I got from Salford. Liverpool is, again, you saw a clip. Now, interestingly, Upper Pitt Street that I went to, which was where Charles Wooten, one of the most famous victims of the race riots, who was killed by stones being thrown at him in Liverpool, was chased from this street, Upper Pitt Street, that you can see here, and Great George Square. Now that doesn't look very gentrified, but what struck me was that some 2 years ago I was in exactly the same area for Labour Party conference. The world transformed, had events, satellite events all around, and at no point, no discussion I ever heard mentioned was there any acknowledgement that there was even a black community here 100 years ago, or that race riots sort of were triggered in this specific part of Liverpool. Talk about the invisibility of black suffering within sort of British working class and British left-wing circles, champagne socialists if you want to call them that. But that is a particularly striking example of how there's a disconnect between the aims and intentions of some very good people that I met at The World Transformed and the erasure of a black presence there and a black working class that's shaped and directed the tenure of Britain for well over 100 years. I ain't got time to get into all of this, but it's going to be very, very deep. As I said, do check out my website, soweto-kinch.com / I think it would be / hashtag Black Peril 2020, but I'll be posting a lot more information up on my socials about it. Moving to Cardiff. I mean, it's even more striking that Millicent Street, which was a site of Arab lodgings and a few other places, are now basically just parts of a big shopping complex or tiny little alcoves behind what would be the equivalent of a Westfields or the Bullring shopping centre. The pace of commercialisation and capitalism has sort of layered up consumerism over the stories. It's basically eradicated the presence of shanty towns or working class communities of mixed heritage within England. I find that very interesting. And I'm saving the artistic comment for the incredible team that I'm assembling around me. If you don't know, it won't just be me playing the saxophone, it's going to be some of the finest jazz musicians and new and emerging voices from across the country. I'm going to be joined by Zosa Cole, my brethren Nick Jerd on bass, Yahil Anono, Hannah Mbuya, Grifton Forbes Amos, a whole array of people. I don't want to miss any names out, but I'm really excited about London too. It's going to be Robert Mitchell and Jay Phelps. It's going to be hip. We've got dancers in every location. Fionn, Stefano, some incredible movers. Tanea, who you may have seen a clip of earlier on in what I was showing behind me. So I'm taking the full cast, more or less, of the Black Peril that put the show up in the first place and bringing them back together to do socially distanced, but intellectually and spiritually connected music, hopefully, and creativity. To bring you this Black Peril 2020 festival, it's going to be really, really dope. Join me on Wednesday if you can as well, where I'll be discussing a lot of the issues and I think hypocrisies in the arts sector to do with race, performative allyship, as part of the Empty Shop project. So look that up. I'll probably just tweet these things out on Twitter very, very soon as well. So follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and of course here on Facebook, where we'll be keeping you abreast of all of the changes. That's what's up. I don't want to leave anything out, but I don't want to cram too much in to this initial discussion about Black Peril 2020. I want to leave, as I said, wet appetites. But I should mention pretty much how fuming going to London Docklands left me yesterday. I travelled, as I said, the length and breadth of the country looking for remnants of Black or Chinese and mixed communities that could be an inroad into this history. Really touched to get contact with great people doing work like Jamie Baker in Cardiff and various projects, Nicholas Evans, some really great historians and people connected to this history. That's been all good. I got to the West India dock, and knowing full well that there might not be any sort of glorified monument to a Black presence there, what I did see angered me. There's no other way of putting it. So this is Jeremiah Street, a part of East London, where there are actually receiving centres for sailors, many of whom would have been Black, Chinese, or from the colonies in some way. And there were ferocious riots in which a lot of these safe homes, these resting spaces, were burnt down by angry white mobs. And we're not talking about tens or 20s of them, we're talking thousands strong, as many as 10,000 in a single crowd of people chasing after Black or Chinese people, burning down a Chinese laundry on Grundy Street, which, if anyone knows that part of East London, it's quite a long street in Poplar. You'd never imagine that there was a Chinese population large enough to attack. But what really got my blood boiling was at West India Quay itself. There are lots of pictures that I took on my phone that I've not used on this little screenshot here. But they have this palatial space opened up by West India Quay. If anyone's been around there, you'll know how sort of trendy it is. And yes, of course, even with social distancing, they're opening it up now so people can have their spritzers and chill out and enjoy a bit of summer sun. All around this new development called The Spire, which isn't built yet, are a homage, if you like, of different plaques and commemorations and descriptions of the ingenuity of the designers of the West India dock, about their expertise in sculpting canals and docks, and in general their knowledge of shipping, and their great commercial enterprising spirit. We're talking about waxing lyrical about these people for, it felt like at least 500 meter square. I'll try and find some more pictures and ingratiate them with you in coming weeks. But what struck me is that the cognitive dissonance required to do all of that and call it West India Dock, West India Quay, not mentioning slavery once, not mentioning the sacrifice of people that came over in 1919 and lent their energy and their vigor and their creativity to making Britain prosperous. Not even a cursory mention, not a plaque anywhere of the immiseration, the unremunerated labor that went into making Canary Wharf what it is today. And the backdrop, of course, you have these shining citadels to capitalism, the HSBC Tower, all of Canary Wharf glittering in its splendor. And you think, yes, there has to be a connection. There has to be some justice to the fact that these towers look like they're going to be shaken by whatever happens in the next few months. And it is a reckoning of sorts. I'm not going to say it's calm fully, because I don't know what the next few months hold for this economic system or for this culture. But I can say it's viscerally wrong to steal, to rob and deny the people that you've stolen from their humanity, and then to erect these monuments to the thieves. There is literally a statue, if you like, there's literally a monument, I should point this out, to a slave ship. Here we go. This little part just here, it's a little gateway that leads into the Docklands itself. And I was talking to one other black guy who was working that day. He was equally as incensed. There's a little shop that just says rum and sugar at the side of Docklands. No context, just rum and sugar. Let's just celebrate rum and sugar. And we all know how the rum and sugar was extracted and then processed through enslaved Africans who are completely invisible. And to connect a dot that I should probably publish this small article I started writing after the whole David Starkey incident and about history. The idea that it's not a genocide because there are so many damn blacks left is not only offensive and pernicious, but it actually ignores where the genocide takes place. Yes, there was genocide in the plantations, there were genocides on slave ships, genocides in the continent of Africa, genocides in the UK, and that's what the Black Peril and the race riots 100 years ago commemorate. People were killed for no reason other than the color of their skin. But a powerful genocide's also taken place in the history books of David Starkey, in the monuments and in the buildings that have been put up since slavery around the UK, because they've completely eradicated any black presence, as if West India Dock just didn't have any West Indians, or nobody knows what the connection is with rum and sugar. So that is we black people have been written out of our own story. There's been a genocide there. We've been culled from the pages of our own sacrifice. The monuments that are erected around us have no figurative or literal representation of the immense sacrifices that we made. And that's wrong. That must demand a reckoning of sorts. I do feel like this is the death knell for a particular form of capitalism. And we could go one of either two ways. We'll either recognize that there is a better way to do things than being racist, misogynistic, destroying the environment, or we'll make this heap the same psychoses over the old, the new psychoses over the old psychoses, and keep making the same mistakes. Blame a few Chinese people, blame a few black people, a few brown people. If you don't think this is happening, you know, yeah, sure, I'm hypersensitive, I'm noticing these things a lot more because I'm on the tour, but I want to see if I can find this picture, it's very important. Come on, don't let me down. Bear with me, people. There we go, thank you. This picture is one of 3 that I saw up in the north of England specifically. Every single public health announcement, there was one called stay inside, work out. And I'm not saying this is deliberate, but there might be either a subconscious or very conscious attempt here. Every public health notice I saw had a black or Asian person on the poster. A BAME person representing the disease. And you think, oh, is this a subtle dog whistle? Do they want to suggest that this disease is coming from abroad, it's not Britain's fault? That seems a bit paranoid. And then you factor in the stories around Leicester. Not just that Leicester is in a second spike, but that it's because of Indian-run sweatshops somehow. And now this new story about Eastern European workers in Malvern being this second spike. I'm not saying that these aren't serious, legitimate public health concerns, but we should all know how the press and media weaponize these things to merely suggest there's something wrong with Eastern Europeans. Not to say it overtly, but just to plant that seed in your mind that Indians in their sweatshops are dirty, that black people are the ones who are carrying this disease and this virus. And if you don't believe that it can't have an effect, then we should all know that there was even more fierce rioting in Hull over 2 years, 100 years ago. So it happened in 1919, it happened in 1920, and it happened in 1921. Salford also had 3 years of successive riots. And it correlated to particular bad bouts of the Spanish flu. So when the Spanish flu had struck, black people got blamed. Chinese people got blamed. The yellow peril and the black peril had a resonance. The red terror had a resonance for particular reasons. People could see the world around them decaying, and they didn't want any more decay. They feared Bolshevism because they thought what it meant was more decay. They feared black people, they feared Chinese people, Lascars and Arabs, because they thought that was responsible for the disease, not a morally bankrupt elite, much similar to the ones who are running the country today. So if we don't learn from the past, if we don't know the past, as the old adage goes, we're destined to repeat the same mistakes. I'm gonna finish with a song, because that's what I do. Has anyone else got any comments? I'm loving the fact that I've not crashed. I feel like I've had a minor coup here. I'm gonna look at your comments and so forth, but if you've enjoyed this slightly larger green screen broadcast, even though my lip them dry and me tired from travel up and down the country, let me know. I want everybody to be privy to all the magic that's about to go down for Black Peril 2020. We've got new artwork coming, new commissions, the whole shebang, so stay tuned. Let's go. I ain't finished yet, even though my face dry like a cigarette. We're gonna kill it yet. Woo! All I need is a comment just in the comments page so I can get down and I really can engage. I want people talking properly. That's why they got anxiety in the colonies. Because the colonies are here and the British mindset is weird. We hope the racism will disappear, but if it don't, we can listen to Britney Spears. I don't know what I'm saying, I'm just chatting, man. I'm saying I'm proud to be an African. Here in Britain. I hope the people out there are listening. What? Positioning. I'm thinking of a few words to spit again. And I can't think of none. But you know, we started when we begun, and I ain't done. What? A 1, 2, 1, 1. I can't count to 3. I like to get down and I like to MC. And rapping is my profession. You can see I haven't got no suggestions. So the crowd keeps on guessing. Woo! I ride the microphone like an equestrian. No question. I'm gonna leave you with this tune. It's another sort of anthemic thing I like playing every week. You know, maybe you don't, but when you start getting in your bag of a particular tune, you just kind of want to play it all the time. And for those saxophonic fans out there who are a bit tired of me just playing tenor at the moment, I literally couldn't find a reed for the alto. That's how mashup man is at the moment. You get me, fam. So I'm gonna be back to some alto very, very soon in the near future, but leave you with this piece right here, which I like. Still called Sax Triumph for the time being. Let's go. A 1, 2, 1, 2. Jeez. Take me back to the beach. Take me back to the imaginary beach, y'all. Woo. Yes, indeed, Marianne. I see you. I sees you. Do keep tuned in because there's so much more information to come. My name is Soweto Kinch. You've been listening to the rough and ready, ever raw, but ever authentic Lockdown Session. This is 16 already. God bless you all. I hope you have a magical week. It's going to be an exciting time over the next couple of weeks for me. So keep tuning in here and look out, because the Black Peril is coming. Not as you think it is, but even better than you think it is. Watch out, Toby Young. The Red Terror, Black Peril is on its way.
It's Red Terror, Black Peril,
Until next
fever
week,
time.
take good
The
care.
masses need dividing. Race myths and reams of lies still sit beside the feet of a defeated Kaiser. So you must be the virus. Keep inside the screams and violence. Hate adrenalized, keep them unequal. Feed them misleading lies, feed them people to demonize. It's all a sequel. Secret ties they keep disguised so we can't see the sky. Street sirens never seem to see them silent, off the leash and leaderless, iron string stealing wire. Look, see, they're stealing wives. As the seasons wind, keep them blinded, flightless, feet binded, all at sea, they don't deserve a seat. Keep them sleeping in sties. Keep them uniting, keep them striking, you don't meet the legal requirements. People penalized never seem to see the prizes or read the signs. Heard in the news sheets and wireless. Chief advisors, elite assignments never seen to creep and sneak behind them. Just dreaming of the beast Poseidon, ports and crisis, sailors reside beside the sea, never seem to see the wider horizon and the sea beside them. So row, row, row your boat to sow the seeds of violence, heaving, climbing black, lethal creatures, increasing crime. You people need to stick to cleaning, sweep the dying, repatriate, tell them leave, we need peace and quiet. Heathens, diseases seize their minds, so it's Red Terror, Black Peril, fever time. It's Red Terror, Black Peril, fever time.